The story of us is a simple one, a story we are told from our first days in school. It begins in shadow and mist, with hunter-gatherers huddled around a fire, gazing at the stars in primitive wonder. It then follows a clean, predictable line, from the first spark of agriculture, through the rise and fall of empires, the slow, steady climb of the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, to the Renaissance, and finally, to us, the inheritors of all that came before, the pinnacle of a long, unbroken ascent. It's a comforting story, a logical one, but it is a story with ghosts. All across the world, buried under sand or hidden in plain sight, are artifacts that refuse to fit this neat timeline, echoes from a past that does not belong. We find megalithic structures carved with a precision that even our modern machines would struggle to replicate. We find intricate devices whose engineering genius precedes its time by millennia. We find ancient maps depicting lands that were supposedly not discovered for thousands of years. These are the glitches in our history, the silent, stone-faced enigmas that stare back at us from an impossible antiquity, challenging everything we think we know.
High in the Bolivian Altiplano, 13,000 feet above the sea, the air is thin, and the light is sharp and unforgiving. This is a world painted in stark monotones, the deep blue of the sky, the pale gold of the hardy ichu grass, and the endless, aching brown of the arid earth. It is a landscape that feels ancient, primordial, a place seemingly untouched by the ambitions of humankind. And yet, here, in this desolate wilderness, lies a scar of impossible geometry, a ruin that doesn't just challenge our understanding of history, but shatters it into a million perfectly cut pieces. This is not a city of soaring pyramids or grand temples. From a distance, it appears as a field of chaos, a vast open plain littered with enormous blocks of stone, scattered as if by the hand of a furious giant child. This is PUMA PUNKU. In the local Aymara language, the name means the door of the puma. But as you draw closer, the initial impression of chaos melts away, replaced by a profound and unsettling sense of order. The scattered blocks are not mere rubble. They are masterpieces of stonecraft, lying broken and abandoned. These are not rough-hewn megaliths stacked by brute force. They are colossal, multi-ton blocks of andesite and diorite, shaped with a precision that seems utterly alien to the ancient world. You see vast stone platforms, their surfaces machined to a near-perfect flatness. You see H-blocks, a signature of the site, carved into complex, interlocking shapes with an eerie, almost unnerving uniformity. Grooves are cut into the stone with the straightness of a laser beam. Perfectly circular holes are drilled deep into the rock, their inner surfaces smooth to the touch. It is a scene of immense cognitive dissonance, the brutal, unforgiving landscape and the delicate, intelligent, and impossibly precise engineering. It feels less like a ruin and more like the wreckage of a machine made of stone. This is the mystery of PUMA PUNKU, a place that whispers of a technology that, according to our history books, simply should not exist. So who built this wonder? What story does mainstream archaeology tell us? The official narrative places PUMA PUNKU within the context of the great Tiwanaku civilization, a powerful pre-Incan culture that flourished in this region from roughly 300 to 1000 AD. Archaeologists believe that PUMA PUNKU was the spiritual and ceremonial heart of the Tiwanaku capital, a monumental complex of temples and plazas designed to awe and inspire. It was, they argue, the pinnacle of Tiwanaku architectural achievement, a testament to their ingenuity and devotion to their gods. According to this view, the incredible stonework was achieved through sheer human effort and time. The accepted theory posits that armies of laborers used primitive tools, heavy stone hammers to pound the blocks into rough shape, and smaller, harder stones for the finer work. For the mirror-like finish, they would have used sand and water, endlessly grinding and polishing the surfaces over months, perhaps even years. The precise cuts and grooves? These are attributed to the patient use of bronze or copper chisels, tools that are significantly softer than the andesite and diorite rock they were supposedly cutting. The immense blocks themselves, some weighing over 130 tons, are said to have been quarried miles away and laboriously dragged to the site using log rollers, ropes, and the sheer power of thousands of men.
It is in itself an incredible story of human achievement. A Bronze Age culture living in a high-altitude desert with no written language and no knowledge of the wheel, creating a wonder of the world through faith and perseverance. It is a narrative that celebrates the boundless potential of the human spirit. And yet, when you stand among the ruins, when you run your hand across a surface so flat it defies belief, when you stare into a drill hole so perfect it could have been made yesterday, that story begins to feel less like a celebration of ingenuity and more like a convenient fiction. The evidence on the ground doesn't just question the official narrative, it screams that something is profoundly wrong. The problems begin with the very material the builders chose. Andesite and diorite are incredibly hard volcanic rocks. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, where a diamond is a 10, these stones rank between a 6 and a 7. The supposed tools of the Tiwanaku, bronze and copper chisels, have a hardness of only about 3.5. The idea of carving intricate, razor-sharp angles into a material that is exponentially harder than your tools is not just difficult, it's a physical absurdity. It's like trying to carve a granite countertop with a copper spoon. You will destroy the spoon long before you make a meaningful mark on the granite. But let us for a moment suspend our disbelief and assume they had a method. That still doesn't explain the quality of the work. The precision at PUMA PUNKU is not just impressive for its time, it would be a challenge for master stonemasons today, even with computer-aided design and tungsten carbide tools. We find surfaces that are flat to within fractions of a millimeter. We find perfect right angles that do not deviate over several feet. There are no telltale signs of hand tooling, no slight imperfections, no chisel marks, no uneven surfaces that betray the slow, arduous work of a human hand. The stones look manufactured. Take the famous H blocks. These iconic stones are scattered across the site, all remarkably similar in their complex dimensions. Each block features multiple planes, sharp interior and exterior corners, and interlocking notches. Engineers have noted that these seem less like decorative stonework and more like modular interlocking components. They appear to be prefabricated pieces of a much larger structure, designed to fit together perfectly, almost like a gigantic ancient Lego set. The challenge is twofold. First, why create such a complex shape? And second, how did they replicate it with such astonishing uniformity time and time again, using nothing but stone pounders and soft metal chisels? The precision implies a system of measurement and a method of production that seems far beyond the known capabilities of the Tiwanaku. Then there are the drill holes. In many of the blocks, we find arrays of small, perfectly round holes. Some are shallow, while others plunge deep into the stone at precise angles. The interior of these holes is perfectly smooth, showing concentric circles that are indicative of a high-speed rotational drill bit, something that was supposedly not invented for another 1,000 years. How could a civilization without advanced metallurgy or mechanics create a tool that could drill with such precision through one of the hardest stones on Earth? Mainstream archaeology suggests they could have used bamboo rods and sand as an abrasive. But this slow, laborious process would not account for the sheer number of holes, their precision, or the machine-like smoothness of their interior walls.
And finally, there is the staggering logistical problem. The main quarry for the largest andesite blocks is located on the western shore of Lake Titicaca, some 55 miles away. The blocks, weighing up to 130 tons, would have had to be moved across treacherous, mountainous terrain at an altitude where the air is thin and human energy is quickly exhausted. The common theory of using log rollers is immediately problematic, as the Altiplano is far above the natural tree line. There simply were not forests of large trees to provide the necessary timber. The level of organization, planning, and raw power required to transport these megaliths defies a simple explanation of manpower alone. The mainstream narrative asks us to accept a series of near miracles. It asks us to believe that Bronze Age people, using primitive tools, worked a stone harder than their implements to a degree of precision that challenges modern technology, creating prefabricated, modular components that they then transported over miles of treeless, high-altitude terrain. When the anomalies pile this high, perhaps it is time to question the story itself. If the stones were not carved by hand with primitive tools, then how were they made? When we abandon the orthodox explanation, we are forced to venture into territory that is far more speculative, but also far more compelling. We must consider the possibility that the builders of PUMA PUNKU possessed a technology so advanced it has been entirely lost to history. One of the most straightforward alternative theories is that the builders used advanced machining tools. The clean cuts, sharp interior angles, and polished surfaces are not characteristic of hand carving. They are the hallmarks of high-speed cutting and grinding. Could the builders have possessed something equivalent to modern diamond-tip saws or computer-controlled milling machines? The drill holes, in particular, strongly suggest a form of high-speed rotational power tool. This hypothesis explains the physical evidence perfectly. The only problem is that it completely shatters our accepted timeline of human technological development. It implies a level of knowledge in metallurgy, mechanics, and energy that simply does not fit into our picture of the ancient world. A second, and perhaps even more radical theory suggests that the stones weren't carved at all. What if they were cast? French material scientist Joseph Davidovits has proposed that ancient cultures may have possessed a sophisticated knowledge of geopolymer chemistry. This theory suggests the builders didn't carve the hard andesite rock, but rather pulverized it, mixed it with a binding agent to create a form of ancient, high-tech concrete, and then poured this slurry into reusable molds. This single, elegant hypothesis would explain almost every mystery at the site. It would explain the uniformity of the H-blocks, as they could all be cast from the same mold. It would explain the complex shapes and sharp interior angles that are easy to create in a mold, but nearly impossible to carve. It would explain the absence of tool marks and the smooth, almost artificial feel of the stone. And it would dramatically simplify the transportation issue. It is far easier to transport bags of crushed rock and binder than it is to move a 100-ton megalith. While controversial, the geopolymer theory is a serious scientific proposal that aligns with the physical evidence in a way the mainstream theory simply does not.
Finally, we must acknowledge the name given to this place by those who study its most fringe possibilities: the impossible stonework of the star gods. While it may sound like fantasy, we cannot ignore the ancient myths of the region. Local Andean legends, passed down for generations, do not speak of thousands of men dragging stones with ropes. They speak of the site being built in a single night by a race of giants, or by the gods themselves, who moved the massive stones through the air with the power of sound. Could these be more than just campfire stories? Could they be a folk memory, a distorted mythological description of a people who wielded a technology so advanced that it appeared to be magic to the uninitiated? A technology that allowed them to lift and shape stone with an ease that would have made them seem like gods to any primitive observer. The legends are not evidence in themselves, but when the physical evidence on the ground presents us with a technology that appears godlike in its capability, we must at least wonder if the myths hold a kernel of forgotten truth. PUMA PUNKU does not exist in a vacuum. Its impossible precision is echoed in other mysterious megalithic sites across the globe. We see a similar style of inexplicable interlocking stonework at Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo in nearby Peru. We see it in the colossal foundation stones of Baalbek in Lebanon, and in the strange, machine-like precision of the Osirian temple in Egypt. These sites, separated by thousands of miles and, according to conventional history, thousands of years, all seem to share a common architectural fingerprint, a signature of a lost science of construction. It's as if we are looking at the scattered puzzle pieces of a single, forgotten episode in human history. Perhaps PUMA PUNKU was not the work of the Tiwanaku culture at all, but the much older ruin that they discovered, revered, and built their own civilization around. Perhaps it is a remnant of a global, seafaring, technologically advanced civilization that predates all known cultures. A lost parent civilization whose existence is hinted at only through these impossible stone ruins they left behind. PUMA PUNKU, then, becomes more than just a local mystery. It is a key piece of evidence for a version of human history far older and far more advanced than we have ever been told. The silent, broken stones of the Altiplano present us with a profound choice. We can accept the orthodox story, and in so doing, ignore a mountain of contradictory evidence. Or we can accept what our own eyes tell us, that someone at some point in the distant past possessed the ability to shape stone with the ease and precision of a modern factory. The ruins don't just ask us how they were built. They demand that we ask who the builders were and what became of their incredible knowledge. The mystery of PUMA PUNKU is the mystery of a lost chapter of our own story, a chapter that speaks of a forgotten peak of human achievement. The stones here offer a chilling message, that a technology capable of shaping the very bedrock of the planet may not be a modern invention, but a forgotten echo. It forces us to wonder, if our ancestors possessed the power to engineer mountains, what other forms of lost knowledge might be waiting to be rediscovered? Perhaps the next blue lies not in stone, but in a machine, one found resting in the silent darkness of the deep sea. Off the jagged coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, the Aegean Sea holds its breath. It is a place of sudden, violent storms, where the water can turn from a tranquil turquoise to a churning, wrathful gray in minutes. It was one such storm, in the spring of 1900, that forced a crew of Greek sponge divers to seek shelter in the island's lee. While waiting for the tempest to pass, they decided to explore the seabed below. What they found there would not only change their lives, it would eventually force us to rewrite the history of the world. Lying some 45 meters beneath the waves was the ghostly silhouette of a Roman-era shipwreck. For the next year, the divers, sponsored by the Greek government,
undertook a perilous and pioneering feat of underwater archaeology. They brought up a treasure trove of artifacts that had slumbered in the deep for 2 millennia. Magnificent bronze and marble statues, elegant glassware, intricate jewelry, and ornate pottery, all testaments to the wealth and artistry of the ancient world. And among these priceless treasures, there was one object that seemed entirely out of place. It was an unremarkable calcified lump of bronze, about the size of a large book, corroded and swollen by centuries in the salt water. It was brought to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens and, for a time, largely ignored. It was believed to be just another piece of a shattered bronze statue, an undecipherable remnant. But then, 2 years after its discovery, the lump of bronze did something unexpected. It split apart, and inside was a secret that defied belief. Not the solid interior of a sculpture, but an impossible labyrinth of interlocking gears, cogs, and wheels, packed together with a watchmaker's precision. The archaeologists were stunned. This was not art. This was a machine. A machine of a complexity they could not comprehend, found in a context where it simply should not exist. For decades, the object remained a profound enigma. The prevailing academic view slowly, cautiously took shape. By studying the faint inscriptions and the arrangement of the gears, scholars determined it was from the Hellenistic period, likely constructed between 150 and 100 BC. They concluded it was a form of orrery or an astronomical calendar, a clever and undoubtedly complex device for its time, used to track the movements of the celestial bodies. It could predict the position of the sun and the moon, the phases of the lunar cycle, and even the timing of solar and lunar eclipses. It was, in the words of the mainstream, the most complex piece of machinery known from the ancient world. A remarkable achievement, certainly, but one that was ultimately understood as the pinnacle of Greek mechanical arts before that knowledge was lost in the ensuing Dark Ages. It was an anomaly, yes, but it contained one. An artifact that pushed the boundaries of our understanding, but didn't entirely break them. But the more we have studied this impossible object, the more it seems to shatter those boundaries completely. The truth of the Antikythera mechanism, revealed by modern technology, is far more challenging and far more mysterious than a simple, clever calendar. To call it the pinnacle of ancient Greek clockwork is to fundamentally misunderstand what we are looking at. It is like calling a modern supercomputer a clever abacus.
The problem begins with the sheer, unbelievable precision of its construction. Modern CT scans and high-resolution imaging have allowed us to peer inside its corroded shell and reconstruct its inner workings digitally. What we found is a system of at least 37 interlocking bronze gears. Some of these gears have teeth that are barely a millimeter long, cut in perfect 60-degree equilateral triangles. This is not the work of a blacksmith hammering away at a forge. This is the work of a master machinist, a scientist. The level of precision engineering required to create such a gear train, where dozens of components must mesh and move in perfect harmony, was simply not believed to have existed until the great cathedral clockmakers of 14th century Europe, more than 1,500 years later. And nestled deep within this symphony of gears is one component so shockingly advanced that it overturns our entire timeline of technological evolution. The mechanism contains what is known as a differential gear. This is a truly sophisticated piece of engineering. It's an assembly that can take two separate input rotations and produce a third rotation that is their sum, or, more importantly, their difference. In the Antikythera mechanism, it was used to accurately model the Moon's irregular orbit around the Earth. To invent the differential is not a small step. It is a giant conceptual leap. It requires a profound understanding of mechanical physics. And before the discovery of the Antikythera mechanism, the first known example of a differential gear appeared in the designs of Leonardo da Vinci in the 15th century, and it wasn't successfully built until the 16th century. Yet here it is, sitting in a museum in Athens, pulled from a 2,000-year-old shipwreck. A piece of technology, a scientific concept made manifest in bronze that should not, could not exist for another millennium and a half. This single component breaks the timeline. It raises the most profound and unsettling question an archaeologist can face. How? If the Greeks of the 2nd century BC possessed this level of mechanical knowledge, where is the evidence of its evolution? Where are the simpler precursors? Where are the other similar devices? Where are the tools capable of crafting these miniature, precise components? We have found none, not a single one. The Antikythera mechanism is a technological orphan. It appears in the archaeological record as if from nowhere, with no known ancestors and even more mysteriously, no known descendants. The knowledge that built it seems to have simply vanished from the face of the earth. It is a ghost in the machine of history, a silent bronze testament to a chapter of human ingenuity that has been almost completely torn from our books.
For over a century, scientists have worked to decode the secrets locked inside this bronze puzzle box. Using the most advanced imaging technologies on Earth, the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project has been able to read thousands of characters of microscopic Greek text inscribed on the device's faces and inner plates. What they've found is nothing short of a user's manual. The mechanism wasn't just a device, it was a textbook. It was a complete, mechanized encyclopedia of the astronomical knowledge of its day. It didn't just track the simple movements of the sun and moon. It modeled the complex Greek cosmos. It accounted for the elliptical orbit of the moon using a brilliant pin and slot mechanism that physically mimicked the theories of the astronomer Hipparchus. It predicted eclipses with a Saros style, a 223-month cycle that is still used today. It even kept track of the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games, indicating this wasn't just a tool for astronomers, but for society at large. It was a computer, a portable, programmable analog computer that modeled the universe as they understood it. So where could such a thing have come from? One theory proposes the lone genius model. It suggests that the mechanism was the singular creation of an unrecognized Da Vinci of the ancient world. Cicero, the Roman orator, mentions a similar device built by the legendary mathematician and inventor Archimedes of Syracuse. Perhaps this is that very device, or one built by his students. It's a compelling idea, a singular flash of brilliance from one of history's greatest minds. But it feels incomplete. Great inventions don't arise in a vacuum. They require a foundation of knowledge, a supply chain for materials, and skilled artisans to execute the vision. A lone genius can have an idea, but to build something this complex requires a supportive technological culture, a culture for which we have no other evidence. This leads to a second, more profound theory, that the Antikythera mechanism is not a singular invention at all, but is instead the last surviving example of a widespread but now lost tradition of complex mechanical engineering. It suggests that what we see as a singular peak of achievement was actually just commonplace technology for a select group of ancient scientists. In this view, the device is not the exception, but the rule, a rule whose other examples have simply been lost to the ravages of time, melted down for their bronze, destroyed in fires, or lying in undiscovered shipwrecks at the bottom of the sea.
Think of what this implies. It means that the burning of the Library of Alexandria, or the slow collapse of the Roman Empire, represented a loss far greater than we ever imagined. We didn't just lose scrolls and books. We lost machines. We lost science.
We lost an entire branch of human potential that was so completely pruned from the tree of knowledge that we are only now rediscovering its shadow. The mechanism isn't just a fluke, it's a survivor, a witness to a world that was, in many ways, far more modern than our own history books are willing to admit. The existence of this one object fundamentally changes our perception of the past. The arrow of technological progress, which we imagine as a straight, unwavering line from the stone axe to the silicon chip, is a fiction. The story of humanity is not so simple. It is a story of great leaps forward, but also of catastrophic stumbles backward, of incredible knowledge gained and then devastatingly lost. The Antikythera mechanism is the ghost of a lost future. It is a relic from a timeline where the Industrial Revolution might have begun in the age of Caesar. What kind of world would have produced such a device not as a masterpiece, but as a standard instrument? A world with advanced metallurgy, precision mechanics, and a deep, functional understanding of physics and mathematics. A world that was perhaps on the very brink of a scientific and industrial explosion. A world that was snuffed out before it could truly begin. We were lucky to have found it. A chance storm, a curious diver, a fortunate accident in a museum. It was rescued from the silent, crushing oblivion of the deep sea. It stands today as a stark bronze reminder that we are a species with amnesia, that our history is riddled with gaps, with mysteries that hint at chapters we can no longer read. It forces us to look at the ruins of the ancient world not just as decaying stone and faded art, but as the wreckage of forgotten brilliance. It leaves us with a chilling thought. This one object, this mechanical ghost, was made of bronze. It survived because it was lost to the sea, away from the destructive hands of man. It makes one wonder, what other forms of lost knowledge, what other impossible technologies might our ancestors have mastered? If they could build a computer of metal and gears to map the heavens, what forgotten wonders might they have crafted from sculpted stone, from flowing water, or even from light itself? Deep beneath the golden sands of Egypt, carved into the cool, silent stone of the Dendera temple complex, lies a secret. Here, in the Temple of Hathor, far from the life-giving sun, a series of subterranean crypts hold some of the most baffling images ever produced by the ancient world. To descend into these chambers is to step back thousands of years, into a darkness that feels absolute. The air is still, heavy with the weight of forgotten time. The walls are covered in intricate hieroglyphs, a library of sacred knowledge meant only for the eyes of the highest priests. But among the familiar gods and pharaohs, there is something else, something profoundly out of place. Here, in a long, narrow crypt, a stunningly detailed relief stretches across the wall. It depicts figures standing around a massive, transparent, bulb-like object. Inside this bulb, a long, wavy snake leaps from a lotus flower at one end, stretching towards the other. The bulb itself appears to be supported by a structure that bears an uncanny resemblance to a modern high-voltage insulator, the JED pillar. And extending from the base, a thick line like a cable runs to a small square box upon which the god of air and eternity, He, is kneeling. The scene is complex, symbolic, and, according to the gatekeepers of our history, entirely mythological.
The mainstream Egyptological interpretation of the Dendera reliefs is one of pure religious symbolism. It is a story of creation, not technology. In this view, the bulb is not a bulb at all, but the womb of the sky goddess Nut. The lotus flower at its base symbolizes creation and the sun. The snake emerging from it is the god Harsamtus, representing the rising sun, being born from the primordial darkness of the cosmic womb at the dawn of time. The Jed pillar, they say, is the spine of the god Osiris, a symbol of stability and power. The cable is merely the celestial barge upon which the sun god travels. The entire scene, therefore, is an elegant and powerful depiction of Egyptian cosmology, a myth carved in stone. This explanation is neat, tidy, and fits comfortably within the established paradigm of ancient Egyptian capabilities. It requires no leaps of faith into unknown technologies, no rewriting of history books. It allows us to view the creators of this relief as people deeply connected to their spiritual world, expressing profound cosmic ideas through beautiful, symbolic art. For decades, this has been the final word on the matter. The case was considered closed. It is a myth, a beautiful, complex story of the birth of the sun, and it would remain so were it not for a collection of deeply unsettling problems. The first and glaring problem is the darkness itself. The tombs, temples, and crypts of ancient Egypt, including this one at Dendera, are decorated with the most intricate and brilliantly colored paintings and reliefs. To create such art requires a powerful and consistent source of light.
But there is a profound anomaly. The ceilings of these exquisitely decorated chambers are almost completely free of soot. Any open flame, be it a torch or an oil lamp, produces smoke and soot as a byproduct of combustion. Over the hours, days, and years it would have taken to complete this masterful artwork, the ceilings should have been blackened, the colors obscured by a layer of greasy residue. Meticulous archaeological analysis has found virtually none. Some have proposed the use of a series of reflective copper mirrors to bounce sunlight deep into the tombs, but the physics of this simply do not hold up. The amount of light lost with each reflection would render the beam useless after just a few turns in the narrow winding corridors. The darkness problem remains one of Egyptology's most persistent and quietly ignored questions. They had light, but how? It is with this question lingering in the air that we turn back to the relief on the wall. The mythological explanation begins to feel incomplete. One cannot help but be struck by the visual parallels to early electrical experiments from our own recent past. In the 19th century, inventors like Heinrich Geissler and William Crookes developed what are now known as Geissler tubes or Crookes tubes. These were early gas discharge lamps, glass bulbs with most of the air pumped out. When a high voltage was applied between two electrodes inside, the remaining gas would ionize and glow brightly, often with a serpentine, snake-like beam of light dancing within. The resemblance to the Dendera relief is not just vague, it is startlingly specific. Let's break down the components again, but this time through the lens of electrical engineering. The large pear-shaped object is the glass bulb or tube. The lotus flower at its base, with its stem connecting to the power box, serves as the perfect analog for a socket and electrical cable. The Jed pillar, the supposed spine of Osiris, is a dead ringer for a modern ceramic insulator, the kind used to isolate high-voltage currents. And most tellingly, the snake, the filament of light, emerges from a point in the socket and travels to the far end of the bulb, precisely like the electron beam in a Crookes tube. The entire relief looks less like a myth and more like a schematic diagram, a blueprint for a forgotten device. Is it possible? Could the Egyptians have understood not just the existence of electricity, but how to harness it? The very idea seems absurd, a fantasy from the realm of science fiction. There is no evidence of power plants, no copper wires crisscrossing the desert. And yet, the carving on the wall remains, a silent testament to something that defies our easy explanations. Perhaps the proof we are looking for is not in Egypt at all. Perhaps it lies hundreds of miles away, in another land, from another time, sitting quietly in a museum in Iraq. In 1936, during an archaeological dig near Baghdad, a strange and unassuming object was unearthed. It was a small terracotta pot, just under 6 inches high. Sealed at the top with an asphalt plug was a copper cylinder, and suspended inside that cylinder, held in place by more asphalt, was an iron rod. It looked simple, almost crude. To the untrained eye, it was nothing more than a curious container for storing scrolls. This was the initial conclusion, and for a time, the object was cataloged as just another piece of ancient pottery. It became known as the Baghdad Battery.
The mainstream archaeological consensus has cautiously proposed 2 potential uses for this device, if it was a device at all. The first and most popular theory is that it was used for electroplating, applying a thin layer of gold or silver onto another metal surface. The second theory suggests a medicinal use, perhaps a form of electroacupuncture, or that it served a purely religious purpose, where priests would hide these pots inside idols to give unsuspecting worshippers a small, mysterious tingle, simulating the presence of a god. These explanations seek to ground the artifact in a familiar, non-technological context. But again, just as with the Dendera light, the official story is riddled with inconsistencies. The most significant challenge to the electroplating theory is a complete lack of evidence. Archaeologists have never found a single unambiguously electroplated artifact from this region and time period. If this technology existed, where are the products of its use? The religious tingle theory is equally problematic. It seems an incredibly elaborate and specific construction for such a simple trick, one that could be achieved through far simpler means. The but moment arrived when modern engineers and researchers looked at the object not as a piece of pottery, but as a piece of hardware. They saw its components for what they were: 2 different metals, an iron anode and a copper cathode, separated and ready for an electrolyte. When they filled a replica of the pot with a simple acidic liquid like vinegar or grape juice, substances readily available in ancient Mesopotamia, the device came to life. It produced a steady, usable electric current of about half a volt. By linking several of these batteries together in series, a much higher voltage could be achieved. It was, without question, a functional galvanic cell, a battery. The Baghdad battery proves that at least one ancient culture possessed the knowledge to create electricity on demand. It is a standalone fact, an anomalous data point that sits uncomfortably outside our accepted timeline of technological progress. We are taught that the principles of the battery were discovered by Alessandro Volta in the year 1800. Yet here's a device, 2,000 years older, that operates on the very same principles. Taken in isolation, the Dendera light is a mythological carving, and the Baghdad battery is a historical curiosity. But when you place them side by side, the picture begins to change. The questions become bolder. What if these aren't isolated anomalies, but surviving fragments of a single coherent and now forgotten body of knowledge? What if ancient civilizations separated by vast distances and hundreds of years both had access to a science of electricity? It was a science that did not rely on massive power grids and rubber-coated wires, but perhaps on a different understanding of physics, of materials, and of the Earth's own energetic properties. Thinkers like Nikola Tesla, a man who himself was a century ahead of his time, became obsessed with the pyramids, believing that they were not tombs, but colossal energy machines designed to resonate with the planet's natural frequencies and transmit power wirelessly. Was Tesla a madman, or was he tapping into a vein of knowledge that was once common understanding? If the ancients could generate light without flame, it would solve the mystery of the sootless tombs. It would mean that deep within the earth, in crypts and chambers, they could work for years on end, creating their masterpieces in the bright, clean glow of electric light. If they could generate a current, they could not only electroplate jewelry, but potentially power more sophisticated devices, tools for cutting, drilling, and shaping the hardest stones with an ease that baffles us today.
This whisper of forgotten power offers a potential key to unlocking some of archaeology's other great mysteries. When we look at the impossible precision of stonework at sites like PUMA PUNKU or the sheer scale of the Giza Plateau, the greatest obstacle is always the question of tools and energy. How did they do it? Mainstream archaeology offers us copper chisels and brute force, an answer that feels woefully inadequate when faced with the evidence. But a lost science of power? That changes everything. It suggests that the world of our distant ancestors may not have been a primitive, superstitious darkness, but a place of brilliance and light, powered by a technology we have only just begun to rediscover. The evidence is scarce, eroded by millennia of chaos and decay, but it is there, waiting in the silent darkness of a tomb or on a dusty shelf in a museum. The implications are staggering. It suggests that human history is not a straight line of upward progress, but a cycle of rise and fall, of incredible heights achieved and catastrophic knowledge lost. We are not the pinnacle of civilization. We are merely the latest iteration, a species with a profound amnesia, slowly relearning the secrets that our ancestors once mastered. They knew how to create power from simple elements. They knew how to illuminate the darkness. What else did they know? What other forces could they command? If they could harness this subtle energy to light up a room, could they have used a more powerful form of it to achieve the truly impossible? Could this forgotten power be the missing link that explains the construction of the most monumental and enigmatic structure on the face of the earth? A structure that seems not to have been built by human hands, but by giants. It stands alone on a windswept plateau, a silent testament to a forgotten age. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the last surviving wonder of the ancient world. For 4,500 years, it has watched the rise and fall of empires, a man-made mountain of stone that seems to defy the very passage of time. Nearly 500 feet tall, composed of 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite, its sheer scale is almost impossible for the human mind to process. It is a monument so vast, so ancient, and so iconic that we feel we know it. We see its image, and we believe we understand its purpose. It is a symbol of ancient Egypt, a testament to the power of the pharaohs, and a tomb. This is the story we are told, the story etched into every history book and taught in every classroom. Mainstream Egyptology presents a clear and concise narrative. The pyramid was built around 2560 BCE during the 4th dynasty as the final resting place for the pharaoh Khufu. It was the culmination of generations of pyramid building, a monumental project that took tens of thousands of skilled workers 2 decades to complete. The evidence, we are told, is all around it. The Giza necropolis, a city of the dead, surrounds the pyramid with smaller tombs for nobles and royalty. The discovery of the workers' village nearby provides insight into the lives of those who labored to raise this stone leviathan. Deep pits carved into the bedrock once held magnificent cedarwood boats, solar barks intended to carry the pharaoh's soul through the underworld. The entire complex, from the Valley Temple to the causeway leading up to the pyramid itself, was designed as a grand funerary procession, a machine for resurrection. The pyramid's internal structure, with its ascending and descending passages, seems to support this. The subterranean chamber, deep within the bedrock, the so-called Queen's Chamber in the heart of the structure, and finally, the King's Chamber,
lined with colossal blocks of Aswan granite. Inside this chamber sits a large granite coffer, lidless and empty. This, we are told, is the sarcophagus of Khufu. The entire structure, in its breathtaking complexity, was designed to protect the king's body and ensure his journey into the afterlife. It is a simple, elegant explanation for the greatest architectural achievement in human history. It is a story that satisfies our need for order, a story that places the pyramid neatly within our accepted timeline of human progress. And for many, that is where the story ends. But it is not that simple. When we look closer, when we dare to move beyond the comfortable answers of the textbook, the story begins to unravel. The Great Pyramid does not give up its secrets so easily. It is a structure riddled with anomalies, with facts that do not fit the narrative. And the deeper you look, the more it seems that this magnificent edifice is anything but a simple tomb.
Let us begin with the most glaring problem. For a tomb, it is curiously empty. No mummy of Khufu or any other pharaoh has ever been found within its walls. In fact, no original burial artifacts of any kind have ever been discovered. The first recorded entry into the pyramid's sealed passages was in 820 AD by the Caliph Al-Mamun. He and his men tunneled their way through the limestone, searching for the legendary treasures of the pharaohs. After weeks of arduous labor, they broke into the ascending passage and made their way to the king's chamber. They found it exactly as we find it today, bare. The granite coffer was empty, its massive lid nowhere to be seen. The official explanation is that the pyramid was looted in antiquity, its treasures stolen thousands of years ago. This is certainly possible. Tomb robbing was common in ancient Egypt. Yet the Great Pyramid presents a unique challenge to this theory. The original entrance was sealed with massive stone plugs, so tightly fitted that Al-Mamun's men couldn't even find it, forcing them to dig their own tunnel. If ancient robbers did manage to bypass these defenses, how did they do it? And why would they take everything, including the pharaoh's body, yet leave behind the one thing they couldn't possibly move, the sarcophagus itself? And then there is the matter of the coffer. Calling it a sarcophagus is a generous assumption. It is a roughly hewn box of granite, completely devoid of the intricate carvings and hieroglyphic inscriptions that adorned every other royal sarcophagus found from that period. It is stark, undecorated, and almost industrial. It is also slightly too large to fit through the passage leading to the king's chamber, meaning it must have been placed there as the pyramid was being built around it. Why would a culture so obsessed with funerary art and ritual leave their most powerful king's final resting place so utterly barren? It is a detail that simply does not fit. The anomalies, however, go far beyond a missing body. They are woven into the very mathematics of the pyramid's design, encoded in its dimensions with a precision that should have been impossible for a Bronze Age civilization. Consider its placement. The pyramid sits almost exactly at the Earth's geographical center, at the intersection of the longest lines of latitude and longitude. A coincidence? Perhaps, but the coincidences begin to stack up. The structure is aligned to true north with an accuracy of within 3/60ths of a single degree. This is a feat of engineering that would be a challenge even with modern GPS technology. How the ancient builders achieved this using only astronomical observation remains one of the pyramid's most enduring mysteries. But the precision doesn't stop there.
The very dimensions of the pyramid seem to be a deliberate message in stone. If you take the height of the pyramid and multiply it by 2 pi, you get its perimeter. This is a relationship that should not have been understood for another 2,000 years. The ratio of its height to its base perimeter is almost exactly the same as the ratio of the Earth's polar radius to its circumference. The numbers are a geodetic and mathematical map of our planet, expressed in stone. The builders encoded the dimensions of the Earth, the length of the year, the precession of the equinoxes, and mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio into this single structure. This is not the work of a simple tomb builder. This is the work of a civilization with a profound and deeply sophisticated understanding of mathematics and astronomy, a level of knowledge that, according to our history books, they simply should not have possessed. And then there is the mystery of the so-called air shafts. 4 narrow shafts, 2 originating from the king's chamber and 2 from the queen's chamber, point outwards towards the sky. For decades, they were dismissed as ventilation shafts. But this explanation makes little sense. Why would a sealed tomb need ventilation? And why do the shafts from the queen's chamber stop before they reach the outside? In the 1990s, robotics engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small robot up one of the southern shafts of the queen's chamber. After traveling nearly 200 feet, it came to a halt. Its camera revealed something astonishing. A small, sealed limestone door with 2 copper handles. The discovery sent shockwaves through the Egyptology community. What lay behind this door? In 2002, a new expedition drilled a small hole through the door, only to find a second, rougher-hewn door just behind it. The mystery had only deepened. These are not air shafts. They are something else entirely. Later research by Robert Bouval revealed that the shafts are not random. They are precise astronomical alignments. The shafts of the king's chamber point to the constellation Orion and the star Thuban, which was the pole star at the time the pyramid was supposedly built. The shafts of the queen's chamber point to Sirius and the Little Bear. The pyramid is not just aligned with the stars. It appears to be a map of the stars. Bouval's groundbreaking Orion correlation theory proposes that the layout of the 3 Giza pyramids on the ground is a perfect mirror of the 3 stars in Orion's belt in the sky. It is a stunning, breathtaking idea. The Giza Plateau is a terrestrial map of the heavens. This was not just a burial ground. It was a statement, an attempt to create a heaven on earth, to link the world of men with the world of the gods. The tomb theory, with its simple focus on a single king's afterlife, begins to feel woefully inadequate to explain this level of cosmic engineering. It feels small. Faced with these baffling anomalies, a new generation of researchers has begun to ask a radical question. What if the Great Pyramid was never a tomb at all? What if its primary purpose was something far more complex, far more advanced, and far more incredible? What if it was a machine?
This is the central thesis of engineer and author Christopher Dunn. After decades of studying the pyramid, not as an archaeologist, but as a master craftsman and engineer, Dunn has concluded that the Great Pyramid bears all the hallmarks of a highly sophisticated power plant, a machine designed to harness the natural vibrations of the Earth and convert them into microwave energy. It sounds like science fiction, but the evidence Dunn presents is deeply compelling. He points to the choice of materials. The outer casing of the pyramid was once covered in polished white Tura limestone, a material that is an excellent electrical insulator. The inner passages and chambers, however, are built primarily of granite, a stone rich in quartz crystal which has piezoelectric properties. This means that when quartz is subjected to pressure or vibration, it generates an electric current. The Earth is constantly vibrating with seismic energy, a low-frequency hum that travels through the planet's crust. Dunn proposes that the pyramid was designed as a coupled oscillator, built to resonate in harmony with the Earth's natural frequency. In his theory, the subterranean chamber would act as the initial resonator,
absorbing the Earth's vibrations. These vibrations would then be channeled up through the structure, amplified by the precise dimensions of the Grand Gallery, which Dunn argues acts as a resonant cavity. The energy would then be focused on the king's chamber. This chamber, built from massive granite blocks, would be the power-generating core of the entire machine. The vibrations would squeeze the quartz crystals in the granite, generating a massive electrical charge. The hydrogen atoms within the chamber, excited by this energy, would release a coherent beam of microwave energy. This energy would then be guided by the northern shaft, which Dunn believes acted as a waveguide, beaming the power out of the pyramid to be used by the surrounding civilization. Suddenly, the strange features of the pyramid begin to make a different kind of sense. The undecorated industrial nature of the king's chamber is not a sign of a rushed burial, but a feature of a machine's engine room. The shafts are not for ventilating a soul, but for channeling energy and coolant. The salt incrustations found on the walls of the queen's chamber could be the residue of a chemical reaction, part of the process of generating hydrogen. The entire structure transforms from a static monument of the dead into a dynamic, functioning piece of advanced technology.
Is it possible? Could an ancient civilization have possessed a science of energy we are only just beginning to rediscover? It is a staggering thought, and it is not the only alternative theory. Others have suggested the pyramid was a device for spiritual initiation, its chambers designed to induce altered states of consciousness. Some believe it was a repository of knowledge, a time capsule of stone designed to preserve the wisdom of a lost golden age through cataclysm and collapse. All of these theories, from power plant to initiation chamber, share one common thread. They suggest that the builders of the Great Pyramid were not who we think they were. They were not Bronze Age farmers struggling with copper chisels and brute force. They were the inheritors of a different kind of knowledge, a profound wisdom that understood the laws of physics, the harmony of the cosmos, and the hidden energies of the Earth itself. The Giza enigma forces us to confront a deeply uncomfortable possibility, that our understanding of the past is fundamentally flawed. We see history as a straight line, a slow crawl from primitive beginnings to our own modern technological peak. But the pyramid stands in silent contradiction to that story. It is a technological masterpiece, a symphony of mathematics and engineering that appears almost fully formed at the dawn of civilization. It is less a beginning and more of a legacy, a remnant of something that came before. So we are left standing in the shadow of this impossible structure, the wind carrying the sands of millennia across its weathered stones. The easy answers have all blown away, leaving only the profound, unsettling questions. If the Great Pyramid was not a tomb, then what was it? And who were the true masters of science and stone who had the audacity to build it? It is a mystery that is not just about the past, it is a mystery about our own potential, a hint of a human story far older and far grander than we have ever been told. The secrets it holds are not just about a long-dead king, but about the very nature of civilization itself. As we look at this perfect man-made mountain, we realize we are not just looking at a relic of ancient Egypt. We are looking at a fingerprint left behind by a ghost, an echo of a lost chapter of the human story. The knowledge required to build Giza seems to have appeared from nowhere and then vanished just as quickly. But did it truly vanish? Or was it simply recorded in a different form? Perhaps the wisdom of the pyramid builders wasn't only encoded in stone, but also in the written word. In texts and maps so strange they seem to describe a world that no longer exists, a world that was once mapped with an impossible and perhaps terrifying accuracy.
In the hushed,
climate-controlled archives of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, amidst the jeweled daggers of sultans and the silken robes of empires, lies a single piece of gazelle skin parchment. It is not the largest object in the collection, nor the most ornate. Yet for those who understand what they are looking at, it is perhaps the most valuable and the most unsettling. The ink, faded but still clear after more than 500 years, delineates coastlines, islands, and notations in a careful Ottoman Turkish script. At first glance, it is a beautiful relic of the Age of Discovery, a testament to a time when the world was rapidly unfolding, when brave mariners pushed the boundaries of the known. This is the famous and infamous Pitti Reis map. It was discovered almost by accident in 1929, tucked away while the palace was being converted into a national museum. Dated to the Islamic year 919, which corresponds to 1513 in the Western calendar, its creation is attributed to one Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri, better known to history as Pitti Reis. He was no mere armchair cartographer. He was a celebrated admiral of the Ottoman fleet, a corsair, a warrior, and a geographer who had sailed the length and breadth of the Mediterranean. He was a man who understood the sea, its currents, its winds, and its secrets. The map, he notes in the margins, was a composite, a synthesis of knowledge. He claims to have consulted over 20 source charts from Portuguese explorers, from Arab sources, 4 of which he said were contemporary, and some were far, far older. He even mentions using a map that had once belonged to Christopher Columbus himself, captured in battle. This, then, is the mainstream, accepted history of the document. The Pitti Reis map is seen by conventional scholarship as a masterwork of compilation, an extraordinary intelligence-gathering document for its time, but a product of its time. Academics point to the known coastlines depicted on the surviving fragment. We see the western shores of Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, rendered with impressive, though not perfect, accuracy. We see the eastern coast of South America, snaking down towards the south. The details are consistent with the knowledge brought back to Europe by explorers like Amerigo Vespucci and Columbus. It is, by this account, a snapshot of the known world in 1513, pieced together by a brilliant military mind from the best available data. It is a historical document, fascinating and important, but ultimately understood, contained within the box of our accepted timeline. But look closer. Linger on the details. Let your eyes trace the coastlines that official history says no one had yet seen. This is where the clean, comfortable explanation begins to fray at the edges, and where a profound, unsettling mystery begins to bloom. For a document created in 1513, the Pitti Reis map contains information that is, by all accounts, completely and utterly impossible. The first hint that something is deeply wrong lies in the map's geometry. It is not drawn on a standard grid like a modern map. It is a Portolan chart, with radiating rhomblines from central compass roses, designed for navigation from port to port. Yet, when modern analysts beginning with the United States Hydrographic Office attempted to superimpose its features onto a modern globe, they discovered something astonishing. The map appears to be drawn using a sophisticated form of spherical trigonometry known as an equidistant projection, centered near the ancient city of Alexandria. While the details are distorted towards the edges, as is natural with such a projection, the relative positions of landmasses are shockingly precise. And most remarkably, the longitudes are correct.
This single fact is a historical bombshell. In the early 16th century, sailors could calculate their latitude with reasonable accuracy by observing the stars, but longitude, the east-west position, was a complete mystery. It was the single greatest challenge to seafaring, the cause of countless shipwrecks and lost voyages. Solving the longitude problem required an instrument that could keep perfect time at sea, a feat that would not be accomplished for another 250 years with the invention of the marine chronometer by John Harrison in 1761. Yet here, on a piece of gazelle skin from 1513, is a map that appears to have already solved it. Pitti Reis, for all his genius, did not possess this knowledge. This precision in longitude was not his. It was inherited. It was copied from one of his ancient source maps. But from whom? The anomalies only deepen from there. The map shows the Andes Mountains deep within the South American continent, something no European explorer had yet witnessed. It depicts the Falkland Islands, not officially discovered until 1592. The coast of South America itself continues far to the south, curving eastwards with a shape that was not supposed to be known for decades to come. And then there is the landmass at the very bottom of the chart. For centuries, this was dismissed. Scholars assumed it was either a representation of the mythical Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land, that geographers since the time of Ptolemy believed must exist to balance the continents of the north, or simply a continuation of the South American coastline that Pitti Rice had curled around the edge of the parchment to make it fit. It seemed like a fantasy, a cartographic flourish. It was ignored. That is, until 1956. Captain Arlington H. Mallory, a retired U.S. Navy engineer and an expert in ancient maps, was studying a copy of the chart. He was not a historian. He was a technician. He looked at the lines not as history, but as data, and he saw something that everyone else had missed. Mallory asserted that this mysterious southern coastline was no fantasy. It was, he claimed, a startlingly accurate depiction of the northern coast of Antarctica. The idea was, at the time, dismissed as absurd. Antarctica was a frozen wasteland, its true coastline hidden beneath a sheet of ice over a mile thick. It hadn't even been sighted by humans until 1820, over 300 years before Pitti Rice drew his map. How could he possibly have included it? Mallory's claim was relegated to the fringes. But it caught the attention of one man who would drag this mystery into the light: Professor Charles Hapgood of Keene State College. Hapgood and his students subjected the map to years of intense forensic analysis. They compared the coastline on the Pitti Rice map to the most modern data available, the subglacial topography of Antarctica, mapped only in 1949 by a joint British-Swedish seismic survey team using 20th century technology. The results were chilling. The coastline on the ancient map, specifically the area known as Queen Maud Land, showed a stunning correlation to the landmass underneath the ice. It depicted bays, inlets, and river estuaries that have been buried under a mile-thick glacier for thousands, if not millions of years.
Let that sink in. A map drawn in 1513 accurately shows the geographic features of a continent that would not be discovered until 1820, and whose true ice-free coastline would not be known until 1949. This is the central, impossible fact from which all questions flow. It shatters our timeline. Mainstream science tells us the Antarctic ice sheet is ancient, that this coastline has not been free of ice for human eyes to see it for at least 6,000 years, and possibly much, much longer. So, we are left with a paradox. A 16th century mapmaker copies a chart that depicts a coastline as it appeared in the prehistoric past. Where did this information come from? It certainly did not come from the Portuguese explorers, nor from Columbus. They had never sailed to these frozen shores. Pitti Rice himself provides the clue. He tells us he used ancient sources, maps from the library at Alexandria, charts from a time we now consider primitive. This forces us to consider theories that stretch the very limits of our accepted history. The most straightforward yet profound of these is that Pitti Rice was telling the simple truth, that among his collection of charts was a survivor, a fragment of knowledge passed down from a civilization that our history books have forgotten. A civilization with the means to not only reach Antarctica, but to map it with geometric precision when its coasts were green and free of ice. This was the conclusion reached by Professor Hapgood. His controversial but compelling thesis, detailed in his book Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, proposed the existence of a highly advanced global seafaring civilization in the distant past. This precursor civilization, he argued, possessed a sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and geography.
They charted the entire planet from pole to pole long before the rise of Sumeria, Egypt, or Greece. They were the original source. Their knowledge, Hapgood theorized, was nearly wiped out by a global cataclysm, perhaps the sudden end of the last ice age that left only scattered survivors and fragmented records. Records like the source maps that eventually found their way, centuries later, into the hands of an Ottoman admiral. It sounds like pure fiction, but Hapgood's meticulous research was so compelling that it earned the respect of one of the 20th century's greatest minds. Einstein himself wrote the foreword to Hapgood's book in 1953, stating, "His idea is original, of great simplicity, and, if it continues to find verification, it will cause a shifting of the whole of geological science." When a mind like Einstein sees merit in such a radical idea, it is perhaps unwise to dismiss it out of hand.
The Piri Reis map, then, ceases to be just a map. It becomes an artifact of a different timeline, a tangible piece of evidence suggesting that our current model of history, a slow, linear progression from primitive cave dwellers to us, is fundamentally flawed. It suggests that high science and exploration may not be a modern invention, but a rediscovered art. It hints at a cycle of civilization, of great ages of knowledge that rise, flourish, and are then tragically lost, leaving only enigmatic ghosts behind. This incredible document does not exist in a vacuum. It is a single piece of a much larger puzzle. It stands alongside the impossible precision of megalithic structures, the astronomical genius encoded in ancient temples, and the faint whispers of lost technologies in the world's oldest myths. It is a geographic testament to the same forgotten world that seems to be screaming at us from the stones of PUMA PUNKU and the gears of the Antikythera mechanism. It is the cartographic proof of what these other mysteries suggest, that we are a species with amnesia. We are left holding a document that should not exist, depicting a world that cannot have been seen, using a science that was not yet invented. The mainstream explanation, that it is all a series of coincidences and misinterpretations, begins to feel far more fantastical than the alternative. The alternative suggests that the map is exactly what it appears to be, a copy of a much more ancient and sophisticated original. It is a message in a bottle, a transmission from a drowned world. So we must ask the questions, no matter how uncomfortable. Who were the original cartographers of this phantom world? What instruments did they use to chart a planet with such accuracy? And what cataclysm was so great that it could not only bury their coastline under a mile of ice, but erase their very existence from our collective memory? The map of Piri Reis is a ghost on parchment, an echo of a world we were never meant to know. It challenges the very foundations of our history, suggesting the pages of our past are far more numerous than we believe. But what if the most profound clues are not drawn on animal skin, but are encoded in stories told around fires for millennia, or even written into the very fabric of our oldest monuments? What ancient truths are waiting to be deciphered if only we knew the language?
The journey through our distant past often feels like walking through a dimly lit museum. The exhibits are arranged in a neat, orderly line, from primitive stone tools to the birth of agriculture. From the first cities to the empires of antiquity, it is a story of slow, steady, linear progress. A story that is logical, comforting, and perhaps profoundly incomplete. For in the shadows of this grand museum, there are locked rooms. Rooms that contain artifacts that don't fit the timeline. Objects that whisper of a different story. We have stood before the impossible stones of PUMA PUNKU, cut with a precision that defies explanation. We have peered into the bronze heart of the Antikythera mechanism, a computer born 2,000 years before its time. We have felt the unnerving silence within the Great Pyramid, a monument whose mathematics and engineering speak a language
far more advanced than the one credited to its builders. Each one, on its own, is a fascinating puzzle, a historical curiosity. Mainstream academia explains them away as the work of isolated genius or feats of brute force labor we simply underestimate. They are treated as footnotes, exceptions that prove the rule. But what if they are not the exceptions? What if they are the rule? What if these are not isolated footnotes, but surviving paragraphs from a chapter of our history that has been almost entirely torn out? When viewed together, these anomalies cease to be random. They form a pattern, a ghostly image of a world that is simply not supposed to exist. A world with advanced knowledge of engineering, of astronomy, of global geography. A world that seems to rise, fully formed from the depths of prehistory, only to vanish without a trace. The clean, linear story of progress begins to fracture under the weight of this evidence. It no longer seems like a story of steady ascent, but perhaps one of recovery, a long, slow climb back from a forgotten catastrophe. This leads us to the most profound and unsettling hypothesis of all, that we are a species with amnesia, that the technological ghosts we have witnessed are the last remnants of a highly advanced, globally connected human civilization that predates our own recorded history. Not a civilization of gods or aliens, but of men and women who reached a pinnacle of knowledge, only to be brought low by a catastrophe so complete that nearly all memory of their existence was wiped from the earth. All that remains are these enigmatic clues, scattered like breadcrumbs, stone and metal puzzles that mock our assumptions about the past. They suggest that our civilization is not the first great experiment on this planet, but perhaps only the latest in a long-forgotten cycle of rise and fall. The evidence is clear. Our past is haunted. It is haunted by a level of sophistication we are only now beginning to appreciate. The stones of PUMA PUNKU, the gears of Antikythera, and the secrets of Giza all tell the same story. Our accepted history is incomplete. We are explorers sifting through the ruins of a library we never knew existed, only finding the most durable pages left intact. The ultimate mystery, then, is not what these artifacts are, or even who made them. The ultimate mystery is the scale of our own ignorance. The question is not simply what we have discovered, but what remains lost, waiting in the dark. What else have we forgotten?